Well, when I woke up this morning, it was minus 29 degrees Celsius with the wind chill. So I figured today would be a good day to make something warm and comforting for dinner. So we're going to make beef and mushroom pie. Why don't you follow along with me? Alright, as per usual, we'll start with breaking down the ingredients to make this dish. I've got them all assembled here on the cutting board. Let's take a look. Let's go ahead and talk about the ingredients and the quantities for this recipe. First thing I'm going to talk about the main attraction, or the main attractions, the beef and the mushrooms. So here we have an 800 gram pack of Angus Reserve. This is AAA Angus stewing beef, and you can pretty much use whatever kind of beef you would want to use for this. This is going to be braised for a fairly long period of time. So you want to have something, I prefer something with a little bit of fat in it, and you can see a little bit of marbling in this beef here. This has already been pre-cut obviously for me, but you could buy a large cut of meat and break it down yourself. So again, 800 grams of stewing beef. Button mushrooms, the next important ingredient in this recipe, and these are fairly large size button mushrooms. They're going to probably end up being cut in half. I have about 300 grams, and that's equivalent to about 10 ounces of button mushrooms. We're going to be using some pearl onions in this recipe as well, and these are fresh pearl onions, obviously need to be peeled. If you don't have the availability of fresh pearl onions, you could always use frozen pearl onions. They can be a little bit difficult to find, and of course if you can't find pearl onions, you can just substitute some white cooking onions that are cubed nicely. We've got 4 medium-sized carrots here that we're just going to probably just wash up, and we're just going to cut into a fairly chunky style. We've got 4 pieces of bacon here that's going to add some smokiness and some flavor that we're going to saute our vegetables in eventually. We have got, as our liquid for this braising, as I'd mentioned, this is going to be a braised dish. We've got a beef stock. You could actually do an addition of either beer or wine or sherry for that matter, so I would just in that case just reduce some of the stock quantities that I'm going to be using. Right now I've got 2 liters, so I've got a liter of prepared or purchased stock, 1 liter, and then we've got another liter here of stock that I'd had previously laying around in the freezer that we thawed and heated, so 2 liters total of the beef stock. So as far as other ingredients are concerned, we have a little bit of chopped garlic here, about 2 tablespoons of chopped garlic, some all-purpose flour. We're just going to dust the vegetables down to make an aromatic roux to thicken the sauce slightly. We've got an egg, and we'll come back and we'll talk about that. Just 1 egg, basically. It's going to be an egg wash for the pastry. Some bay leaves and some fresh thyme here. Again, you could use a different type of herb or no herbs at all, but I particularly like thyme. Thyme goes well with the mushrooms, I think, in this dish. So we've got a little small bunch or a small bouquet of thyme that I've just tied with a string at the bottom so I can pull it out afterwards. If you wanted to, you could strip the thyme leaves off and throw those in directly and not bother to take them out. We've got a little butter that's going to help me to saute the vegetables up and give them a bit of color. Got a little bit of canola oil here that we're going to saute the beef in to get that nice and golden brown. We've got a little bit of Italian parsley that we're going to chop, and we're going to add to the beef at the end of the braising cycle just to give it a little bit more flavor and a little bit more color. Now, as this is a pie, we've got a decision to make as far as the pie part of it, what's going to make it the pie. In this case, I'm going to be using a puff pastry, so this is going to be top crusted only. So this can be made a number of ways, just with a puff pastry topping as I'm going to do it today, or it could be made with a bottom and a top crust with a short crust type pastry, or you could actually use that short crust type pastry just to make a single top as well. So my preference for today anyway is going to be the puff pastry sheets. So there you go, there is a rundown. Oh, I don't think I mentioned Worcester. So Worcestershire sauce, Worcester. You made me say it incorrectly. I'm sure I'm going to get corrected, but Worcester as I call it, we're going to add some Worcester in there as well for some additional flavor. All right, let's get cracking. All right, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to saute that beef off. We've got our large Dutch oven here. This is a cast iron enamel pan. We're going to crank it up to high heat on the gas burner, and we are going to add our 2 tablespoons of canola oil directly to the pot, and then we'll come back once we get ready to add the beef in. Once that's smoking hot, we'll add the beef and we'll get that browning off. All right, I can just see the smoke starting to come off the oil here, so I know the pan is nice and hot. So we're going to add our beef in carefully, and we're just going to spread it out around the pot. We're not going to dump it all in one shot. We want this to brown nicely on all sides. Now, I didn't mention seasoning in the ingredients, and that's just a given that we're obviously going to be seasoning this with salt and pepper. We're going to be using black pepper, fairly coarsely ground black pepper. I guarantee you that the smoke alarm will go off at some point. Don't be concerned. My neighbors are used to that by now. You can do this in a couple of batches if you have a smaller pot. Add in some cracked black pepper. Again, I've got this on a coarse grind. I like pepper, so I'm going to add quite a bit. Again, we're going to season in a number of different areas or at a number of different times during this recipe. We'll season it again once we add the vegetables, and we'll season at the end as well. There's our pepper, pinch of salt. Careful with the salt content again. We do have a purchased beef stock for this, so that'll tend to be a little bit salty as well. Alright, we're just going to let this brown, or we're going to brown this on all sides. We'll bring you back in a little bit once we flip this over, and I'll show you the color that we're looking for. Alright, the beef is browning up nicely. That's the color that we're looking for. So we'll move this around the pan. We'll get it browned all around, and we'll move on to the next step. Alright, while that's browning, or the beef is browning, we may as well take our onions and peel these. Now, there's a couple of different ways you can do these. You can actually peel them by hand like I'm doing here, or you can actually boil these, and that will help the skins to come off a little easier. I tend to like to do it by hand, so we'll just go ahead and we'll peel all these. I'm not going to keep you here to watch me do this, but it's a good opportunity to do these while the beef is actually browning off. Just one little tip on the onions: if you can leave the root end on as much as possible. I like the onions to sort of stay together in the dish, so if you leave the root end attached a little bit more carefully, then the onions won't fall apart. Alright, we have our pearl onions peeled and ready to go. Let's check out our beef. So there it is. We just turned the heat off, so it's nice and browned all around. You can see we've got a nice fond developing in the bottom of the pan. We're going to scrape that up in the next part of the process. So we're going to remove the beef, and we're going to just set it aside temporarily. We'll bring that back in afterwards. Now we're going to work on the vegetables for this beef base. All right, we'll get our bacon sliced up and ready to go. So just some fairly nice little strips. So we'll just separate this up, get this ready to go in the pan. So we'll set that aside. All right, next step is to clean these mushrooms off. Generally, I don't wash mushrooms. Sorry, Mom. I just brush them off with a paper towel. You don't want to introduce any moisture to these, so just clean them off as best as you can with a paper towel. And then what we're going to do, based on the size of these, I think we're just going to cut these in half, and then we'll move on from there. So again, I'm not going to keep you here. I'll be right back. I'm just laughing to myself a little bit. As I said, sorry, Mom. Well, I remember my mother's mother, my grandmother, she would actually peel these. Every single one. She would go through. Not only would she wash them, but she'd also peel them. Alright, bacon, onion, mushroom, done. Classic combination. We've got those 4 carrots here. What we're going to do is we're just going to chop these fairly coarsely. I'll bring you back when those are done. And yes, Mom, I'm going to wash the carrots. Just doing a rough chop on the carrots, just something a little different, a little diagonal, and then a little straight, a little diagonal, a little straight, a little diagonal, a little straight, a little diagonal. Bob's your uncle. Let's move on. Alright, so we've got the beef removed from the pot, obviously. Just put it back on the fire. We're going to add our bacon in here and get that frying. So we're going to render this down until it's crispy. And we're going to add a little butter, and we're going to add our vegetables. And like I said, we're going to make what's called an aromatic roux. And then we're going to add our beef stock in, but we'll get there when we get there. So let's do a little time lapse on this bacon frying. Alright, bacon is just crisping up. We've got our 2 tablespoons of butter standing by. We'll add that in now. Alright, we're going to add our carrots in. We're going to add our pearl onions in. We can add our garlic in. And we just want to try to get these a bit of color. So we're not going to add the mushrooms in until the beef is braised a little bit. We'll probably let the beef braise for an hour before we add the mushrooms in. Just wanted to make that note. So we'll go ahead and we'll do another round of seasoning here. Again, more black pepper. Again, watch your salt content. The bacon's going to be fairly salty. We'll add a pinch of salt. Okay, we're getting some color on the veg now. We got our flour standing by. So we're going to go ahead and dust the top of this. About 2 tablespoons of flour. Stir that in. We'll let that flour brown a little bit. We've got our stock standing by. All right, we'll slowly add our stock in, or we'll do about, we'll do it in thirds. Bring it up to the boil after each addition. You're going to want to deglaze the pan, so you want to scrape out those bits out of the corners. You can see that thicken almost instantaneously. We'll add another third in. Give the bottom of the pan a good scrape. That's where all the flavor is. Now here's where you could add you could have added your wine initially instead of the stock, or your beer, or your sherry, whatever you like. Just gave that a good scrape. Add our next bit of stock in here. So that's 1 full liter of stock so far. Let's add some Worcester in. A couple of good shakes there. Again, it's going to be to your taste. Bring this back to the boil. We can throw our bay leaves in now. We've got 3 bay leaves. We can throw our thyme in. We're getting ready to add our beef back in. Alright, just coming back up to the boil or back to the simmer. We'll throw our beef in and any reserved juices. It's actually looking pretty good as far as the stock quantity is concerned. We may want to add a bit more once we add the mushrooms in. We'll see how this reduces. We do have that liter of stock standing by. So what you're going to do now is you got a choice here. You can turn this down, leave it on top of the stove with a cover on, or you can fire it in the oven at 375 and braise it in the oven with the cover on. So regardless of that, which method you decide to use, we're going to cook it or braise it for about 1 hour and 45 minutes. But after an hour, we're going to add the mushrooms in as mentioned. We'll have a look at the stock level and see if we think we need to add any more stock. I think we'll probably be good. So let's turn the heat down to a simmer here, and we'll let this simmer for an hour before we add the mushrooms. We'll check it occasionally just to make sure that the stock level is not getting too low. But we'll put the cover on and say bye-bye for an hour. See you in a bit. Alright, the hour is up. So we'll take a look here at what we have. Definitely looking good. And that has definitely been reducing. See, the volume of the liquid has gone down. It certainly smells fantastic in here. It's looking fantastic. So we're going to add the mushrooms now. We're going to give this a stir. Make sure that we're still scraping everything up off the bottom of the pot. It's looking fantastic. Let's go ahead and add our mushrooms. Let's stir these in. Alright, now that we've added the mushrooms, we're going to continue to braise this for about another, let's say 15 to 20 minutes. And we'll let the mushrooms release some of their moisture, and we'll see if we think we need to add any more stock to this. I don't believe we'll have to. Should be fine just the way it is. So let's braise this for 15 to 20. We're going to braise it for another 45 minutes at least total. But let's check it in about 15 to 20 minutes and see how we are with the liquid level. So lid back on. We'll set the timer again for 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes, and we'll come back and we'll take a look. Alright, we're back after 20 minutes to take a look. Yeah, you can see that the mushrooms have released some of their moisture. So I don't think we're going to need to add any additional stock. That's looking pretty good as it is. So we'll just make sure that again we scrape the bottom, any bits. And we'll continue to cook this for another 25 minutes, and then we'll check for tenderness, and then we'll have to cool this down before we go to the next step. So let's come back in about another 25 minutes and we'll check the beef. Looking good. Smells awesome. Alright, it's been an hour and 45 minutes total, so let's have a look at where we're at. Looking really good. I have pulled out the thyme sprigs and the bay leaves, so those have been removed now. I think that's perfect as far as the consistency is concerned. It's looking great. I have tasted it. I have adjusted the seasoning. I did not add any more salt. It was salty enough. Just added a little bit of black pepper. And the final thing we need to do here is we're going to turn the heat off, and we're going to add our chopped parsley in, just for some freshness and some color here at the end. So we'll stir that in. So now, next part of this process, this needs to be chilled, refrigerated. Needs to be brought down to a temperature where it's not going to be melting the puff pastry as you apply it to the top of this stew. So what we need to do now is probably put this outside on the deck, on the back deck, in that minus 29 degrees Celsius wind chill, and we'll chill this right down. Or you can leave it here. You can put it in the fridge and come back tomorrow. That's probably what we're going to do, is we're going to remove it from the braising pan, put it into a shallow pan, and we'll let it chill in the refrigerator overnight. We'll come back here and we'll finish this off, bake this tomorrow. So we'll see you then. Alright, it's the next day and we're picking up where we left off. I had mentioned that the beef and mushroom mixture needs to be brought back down to room temperature or colder. So we've actually had this in the refrigerator overnight, and there's what it looks like today. We've got our baking dishes out here, so this could be individual size casseroles. This could be one large casserole or one larger baking dish for a larger family. I'm a single guy, so I'm going to be making it into 3 individual portions. You can make the portions as big as or as small as you want. So we're just going to portion these out into the dishes and see how we do. I may have enough to do one more dish, one more smaller dish. Well, let's portion it out, and just remember that this is going to potentially, if you overfill it, it's potentially going to boil over in the oven. So be careful overfilling the casseroles. We do have a baking tray under it just in case, but don't overfill it. Alright, we were able to get 4 dishes total. We've got the 3 ovals, and I've got 1 round here. It's a little bit smaller portion, but should be quite nice for a light lunch. So next step is to roll out the puff pastry. So we'll break that out onto the cutting board now and get that rolled out. Alright, here's our puff pastry. This is a 400 gram pack, 397 gram pack of puff pastry, and this actually comes in 2 small squares. You can get your puff pastry already in larger sheets. So if I was working in the kitchen, for example, this would have come in a larger sheet already rolled out for me. But in this case, it comes in 2 square blocks, as you can see here, and we will need to roll this out to the thickness that we're looking for. So I've got some flour off to the side here, so some all-purpose flour, and we're going to roll this out to an appropriate thickness. I'll come back and I'll show you what that is in just a second. Alright, we have our puff pastry rolled out, and we are just about to cut this portion in half. This will be good for 2 casseroles. So it's about an eighth of an inch thick, about 3 millimeters or so. You can make it thicker if you want. Anyway, there we go. We'll cut that in half. We'll bring over the casseroles. We'll lay it on top. So all I've done here with this puff pastry is I've just put the casserole on top of the puff, trimmed around the base. So we'll pull out the shape, bring over the casserole, drop this right on top. Exactly like that. We'll do a little bit of a vent in the top. However you want to do it. And then we'll break out the egg wash. All right, on to the egg wash stage, which is the final stage before they go into the oven. So I've got 1 egg here. We're just going to crack that into a small bowl. We're going to add a touch of water to that, cold water. Just going to mix it up with beat it up with a fork. We've got our brush standing by here. I'm just going to give them a quick brush on the top, the egg wash. I've got the oven preheating to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. We'll pop these in. I expect these will take somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 45 minutes to bake. Again, you want your puff pastry to be golden browned, and you should see the edges of the stew starting to bubble up and around. Again, the baking time is going to depend on how big the casserole is that you're baking. Obviously, a larger casserole will probably take a little bit longer than individuals, so you'll have to check on that. Alright, I'll just finish up the last ones and we'll get ready to pop these in the oven. Alright, just coming up on the 45-minute mark, and we're going to go into the oven here and bring out the pies. They are definitely looking good. How does that look? Alright, we'll have a quick look at this. It looks fantastic. The consistency of the sauce is just about perfect. Not too runny. We have enough sauce for sure. The pastry is nice and crispy and flaky. So that's it, guys. So hopefully you'll have a chance to make this. Bon appetit. Enjoy.